In this lesson, we're going to look at materials and how to create your first material inside of Blender. So before we do that, we're going to install an add-on that's just going to make your life a little bit easier when working with the material nodes. So first of all, make sure that you have your chair project open, and also make sure that you have created the UV map that we've created in a previous lesson. And then once you're happy with that, we're going to go and install the add-on. So click on Edit and then go to Preferences, and this is where we install any add-ons for Blender. So if you go to the add-on tab, you will see a list of installed add-ons, and we're simply going to search for a add-on called Node Wrangler. So you can just search for Node and then make sure that you have this untick enabled add-ons only. So just untick that and you'll see any add-ons that's not currently enabled, and you'll see one that's called Node Wrangler. As you can see there, you can also expand it to kind of just read a bit about it. You can look at the documentation if you want to, but you simply need to just click this box next to it, and then that add-on will be active. So we can save the preferences by clicking these little lines here at the bottom, save preferences, and then you can simply just close the Blender preferences. Now we've got that add-on installed. Next, you need to download a texture that you want to apply to your chair. Now, I've got a very simple wood texture that I'm going to show you guys how to apply. So you can simply go to either Google and search for wood textures, or you can go to a website like Polyhaven or maybe Quixel. There are many different texture websites that you can use to download free textures. So just go to Google, search for either free textures, or look at Polyhaven, or just simply go to Google Images and search for a wood texture. You want to make sure that the wood texture is high quality, because obviously if you're going to use a very low resolution or a low quality texture, then your chair will have that low quality texture applied to it. So make sure that you download something that's nice, high resolution, and something that looks nice. Once you have your texture saved to your hard drive, you can continue to the next step. So let's create our first material. So simply click on your chair to select it, and then we're going to go to the shading workspace right here at the top of the interface. You'll see shading. So just click on that to open the shading workspace. Now you will see this will automatically change your view to the material preview render, so we can actually see the material applied onto our model. And by default, it will have this white material here at the bottom. Now I can expand this and resize it, and the node system, you can use the same controls. So holding middle mouse, you can pan around. Holding control middle mouse, you can zoom in and out. You can also click on some of these nodes and you can move them around simply by dragging like that. But we're going to delete this default material and create a new material from scratch. So you'll see it says material here at the top. This is the name of the current material, but we just want to remove this one for now. So click on the little X next to that to remove it. So now we're going to create a new material for the chair. So make sure that your chair is selected, and then simply click on the new button here at the bottom to create a new material. Now we can give a name to our material. Currently it's material.001, but I want to rename that to something a little bit easier to recognize. So I'm simply going to click here and let's give this a name. I'm just going to give it a name wood. Press enter, and now this is our wood texture basically. So now we can create different nodes and just create different textures or materials for this model. So the add-on that we installed, Node Wrangler, gives you some shortcuts to simply add some nodes that you usually will have to recreate manually, but all we need to do is click on this first node and then press Ctrl T, and that will automatically create these three nodes for you. Now you can press G to move these nodes around, or you can simply just highlight them and drag them around like this. Now the principled BSDF is your main shader basically, and this is where you can change things like the roughness or the metallic value or the specular value, but we'll get to that in a minute. So first let me quickly just explain what some of these nodes do. So the first node is the texture coordinate node, and that's basically telling Blender how it's going to apply the material to the 3D object. And all you need to do here is make sure that it's coming from the UV map, and then it's going to go into the vector. This is basically saying that we're going to use the UV map that we created earlier. Next is the mapping node, and this is where you can adjust how the material is applied. So you can actually move the material around, you can rotate it, or you can scale it. But for now, we'll just leave it as default. Next is the image texture node, and this is where we can actually load in that wood texture that we've downloaded. So I'm going to click on open, and then I'm going to browse to the folder where I saved that wood texture. So click open, browse to the folder, and then simply select the image texture that you downloaded. Now this can be a JPEG or a PNG or maybe a TIFF file, but yeah, just select that image that you downloaded, click on open image, and now we will see that our chair will update with that wood material. Now we can make some adjustments here. I can maybe set the roughness. If I lower this down, you can see that it will make our texture a lot shinier, so it's reflecting more. Or I can increase the roughness to make it more of a matte material, so it's not reflecting anything. So obviously wood is not as reflective. It depends on the type of wood, I suppose, but you can just change these values and see what it does. So the same goes for the metallic slider, so you can increase that to give a more of a metallic look to your object. So if I decrease the roughness to make it a bit more shinier, you can see that's almost looking like a little bit of a metallic object. So obviously with wood we want to set the metallic value down to 0 maybe, and then play with the roughness until you get a look that you are happy with. So I'm not going to go into too many details now, but this is basically how you apply a normal texture or an image texture to your model. So with this material applied, let's go over to the UV editing workspace here at the top, so I can show you how this material has been applied to the model. So first, let's change the render mode here at the top. You can just scroll to the left, and I'm going to set this to material preview so we can actually see the material in the 3D viewport on this side. So now if I click one of these faces, you can see that face is actually representing that section of our texture. So I can click on another one and I can see this one represent that section of our image. So look what will happen if I take this face and I press G to move it around. If you look at the 3D model on the right hand side, you can see how that texture is actually moving around because I'm moving the UV map around. So I can also scale it. So press S to scale, and as you can see, it will change the way that the material is applied to the 3D model. And I think this will make you understand UV unwrapping a little bit easier. So as you can see, it's basically just showing what's underneath that UV map or that UV island, and that's what you will see on your 3D model. So I'm going to scale this back and I'm kind of just going to place it here, and these can overlap as well. It all depends on your texture that you're using. Let's say it's got an image of something or maybe some text, then obviously you don't really want to overlap them. It depends if you want the same part of the image on multiple faces of your model. But usually you can overlap them if it's something like a wooden texture or just something that you won't really notice that it's reusing different parts of the image on your model. So we can do the same with this one. I can scale this one up and kind of move it around until I get the look that I want. So maybe for these front legs and maybe for this section, you can rotate them as well, and you can see how that will affect the model on the right hand side. So I want to rotate this one 90 degrees. To do that, just press R and then simply type 90 and press enter. And that's going to rotate it exactly 90 degrees. So let's scale that up a bit maybe, move it around, and let's look at our 3D model to see how that looks. So that looks pretty cool. So we can do the same with the sides. So this one is pretty nice, but I can maybe scale it up a bit and just to get something that looks a bit better. And the back we can do the same with. So I'm going to select all of these faces and I'm going to scale them up and kind of move it to the center. So you can do this to kind of just adjust how the material has been applied to your model. So we can do the same with this side maybe. Let's select these faces and maybe let's scale this up and move it up. So we get a little bit of a different look. So now you can see these two faces, they are not kind of connected on the left hand side if I select both of them like that. And that's why that's why we actually see a seam right here, because they're not next to each other. But that's exactly what we want. We don't really want this to be a seamless wooden texture going from here over to that one, because that's just not realistic. So play around with the UV map, select some of these faces, move them around, scale them around and see what looks best for your chair. And then you can also go back to the shading tab and make some more adjustments on this principled BSDF node to just get the exact look that you're going for. So maybe I want to increase the roughness a little bit more to make it less reflective. And yeah, I think that looks pretty nice for now. Now, if we look at the nodes again quickly, you can see that the image texture node, the wooden texture that we have downloaded, we're connecting that to the base color of this principled BSDF shader. So you can disconnect this by just kind of clicking and dragging that to disconnect that. And then you can specify your own base color. So I can click on the base color here and I can make this blue or red or anything. And then that will just apply a normal color to your chair. So you can see it's just a red material. There's nothing else on it, just normal red. But because we want to use an image texture, that's why we're connecting that image texture to replace the base color and use that image as the base color basically. So that's why we see the wood on our model. So I hope that makes sense. Play around with some of these nodes and play around with some of these sliders and see what they do. But yeah, this is just the basics of how to apply an image texture as a material to an object after you have unwrapped it. So once you are happy with this, we can go back to the layout tab and we can also switch over to the material preview here at the top just to kind of see our material in the 3D viewport. And yeah, once you are happy with your texture, you can save your project by just going File, Save, or using the shortcut Control S. And I will see you in the next lesson.